So have you ever like just felt completely bombarded with information? Like you're always on, you know?
Oh, yeah. That feeling of never being able to truly unplug. I think a lot of us can relate to that these days.
That's kind of relentless, right? So that's actually kind of what we're going to be looking at today, like this feeling of being constantly on. We're diving into the work of this philosopher, Byung-Chul Han, who has some pretty intense and maybe even unsettling things to say about our modern world.
Yeah, Byung-Chul Han, he's a really interesting thinker, you know? What I find so fascinating about him is he's not just pointing fingers at technology, like, oh, smartphones are bad, or whatever. He's going deeper. He's like connecting our current state of being to these broader cultural and philosophical shifts, you know, or huge historical trends.
Yeah, and he's really looking at the underlying kind of systems, right, that are creating these problems. And to help us unpack all this, we've got this fantastic essay by Josh Cohen.
Oh, yeah. Cohen's essay. It's a great place to start if you're new to Han's work. He breaks down these really complex ideas in a way that's actually, like, accessible.
Yeah, it's a really great roadmap.
Totally. And, like, you know, Han writes about a lot of different things, but Cohen really focuses on his arguments about digital capitalism, that feeling of burnout that so many of us experience.
Oh, for sure.
And this obsession with positivity and speed that just seems to dominate everything, like faster, better, more.
Right. And it's exhausting.
It is. It is.
So, okay, before we like launch into all of Han's ideas, I think it would be good to like just get to know the guy himself, you know? I mean, we're talking about someone who starts out as a metallurgy student, practically blinded himself in a chemistry experiment as a kid.
Wait, what? He blinded himself?
Almost. But you got to think about that for a second. Like damage, explosions, both literally and metaphorically, seem to be woven into his life story.
And that's actually where it gets really interesting, because you can totally see how those themes of damage and intensity like show up in his work, you know? He sees them as like essential to the human experience, but he worries that we're losing touch with them.
It's almost like he's had this firsthand experience with like the power of these forces, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And he brings that to his philosophical work.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like he's this incredibly thoughtful observer of like the human condition. And, you know, he's really steeped in German thought. But because he comes from this Korean background, he brings this unique perspective, you know?
Yeah.
Like almost an outsider looking in.
Absolutely. And that outsider perspective is so key to understanding his critique of what he calls the burnout society.
Okay, so burnout society, it's a phrase we hear thrown around a lot these days. But what makes Han's take on it different?
Well, he argues that we've shifted from a society where pressure came from like external authorities, like your boss yelling at you to meet a deadline or whatever,
Right.
to a society where we're constantly pressuring ourselves.
So it's less about, you know, you must do this and more about, you know, you can do anything, which sounds great on the surface.
Right. It's like super seductive, but that you can do anything mentality can be a real trap, you know? It pushes us to constantly strive for more, to optimize every aspect of our lives, to be like the perfect worker, the perfect parent, the perfect partner, you know?
Oh, yeah. And it's exhausting.
It is. Han describes it as the achievement subject, just grinding itself down, always at war with itself.
Oh, the achievement subject. It's funny because it's like it just hits home, you know? It's that feeling of never doing enough, never being enough. And I think a lot of us, especially, you know, in our always-on world, can relate to that, right?
Absolutely. I think it's like this universal experience in the digital age.
Totally.
Yeah.
But how does this idea of the achievement subject tie into digital technology specifically?
Well, Han argues that digital capitalism actually thrives on this constant self-optimization. Think about social media, right? We're constantly curating our online selves, presenting this like perfect, polished image to the world, trying to rack up those likes and followers.
It's almost like we're reducing ourselves to data points instead of embracing what makes us unique and, dare I say, a little messy.
Totally. And in that process, we lose something crucial, that sense of mystery, that depth that makes us human, you know? Han says this constant self-exposure actually makes us more vulnerable, more susceptible to manipulation. It's like we're trading our inner lives for this shallow digital existence.
Yeah, so it's not just about, you know, feeling burned out at work. It's about a fundamental shift in how we experience the world.
Exactly.
And it sounds, I have to say, a little terrifying.
It is a pretty stark picture. But Han doesn't just leave us there, you know? He does offer some glimmers of hope, some alternatives.
Okay, well, that's good to hear, because it's starting to feel a little heavy. But before we get to the hope, I want to go back to something Cohen mentions in his essay. He talks about these two German words, Erfahrung and Erlebnis. And I'm guessing they're pretty important to Han's whole argument.
Oh, they're absolutely central. Erfahrung, as Han uses it, is about encountering the unexpected, the negative, even the painful. It's the kind of experience that challenges you, that changes you, that leaves a mark.
So it's not always pleasant.
Right, exactly. But it's deeply enriching. Think about, reading a book that just stays with you long after you've finished it, or having a conversation that completely shifts your perspective on something.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, those moments. On the other hand, you have Erlebnis, which is more superficial, fleeting, and ultimately unsatisfying.
So it's the difference between a deep conversation with a friend versus just scrolling through your phone for an hour.
Yeah. And think about it, what do you remember more?
Definitely the conversation. I mean, who remembers what they saw on their phone an hour ago?
Exactly.
So Erfahrung is like a slow-cooked meal that nourishes you deeply, while Erlebnis is more like fast food, momentarily satisfying, but ultimately empty.
That's such a great way to put it. And, Han argues that digital capitalism pushes us further and further into the realm of Erlebnis. It's chipping away at our capacity for Erfahrung. He sees it happening in all aspects of our lives, from how we work to how we love, even how we experience art.
Wow. So this isn't just about feeling burned out at work. This is about a fundamental shift in how we experience the world.
Right.
And it's kind of terrifying.
It is. It is a pretty stark picture. But the thing is, Han isn't just trying to scare us,
Right.
He's urging us to see how the systems we live in, these kind of invisible structures, are shaping our inner lives, our relationships, our very experience of being in the world.
So it's not just about individual choices. It's about recognizing these larger forces that are kind of influencing how we think, how we feel, how we connect with the world around us.
Precisely. And one of the areas where this plays out most clearly, I think, is in our relationships.
Okay, so let's talk about love in the age of digital capitalism.
Okay, so Han draws this stark contrast between what he sees as true love, which is an encounter with radical otherness,
Okay.
embracing someone completely different from you, and the consumerist ideal of comfortable, narcissistic coupling.
So it's like the difference between wanting someone to complete you versus wanting someone to challenge you, to help you grow.
Exactly. And Han believes that the consumerist ideal of love, this idea of finding someone who perfectly fits our predefined criteria, actually undermines true intimacy. We're so focused on finding someone who makes us feel good, who fits seamlessly into our lives, that we miss the opportunity for genuine connection, for friction, for growth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I think it kind of ties back into that whole idea of smoothness we talked about earlier. We want everything to be easy and frictionless, including our relationships.
It absolutely does. For Han, this pursuit of smoothness, of ease, of positivity is a symptom of a deeper cultural problem.
Yeah.
And he uses the work of Jeff Koons, the artist known for those shiny, flawless sculptures, as a prime example of this.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so tell me more about this tyranny of smoothness thing.
Okay, so Han argues that Koons' work, with its lack of rough edges, its emphasis on spectacle and easy consumption, embodies this cultural obsession with eliminating anything that might challenge us, make us uncomfortable, remind us of the darker, messier aspects of life.
But it's we're losing our tolerance for anything that's not sleek, seamless, effortless.
Exactly. We want everything to be easy, digestible, instantly gratifying. But in the process, we're sacrificing depth, meaning authenticity. And Han argues that this pursuit of smoothness ultimately leads to a kind of spiritual emptiness.
Okay, so we covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about burnout, digital capitalism, the erosion of experience, the tyranny of smoothness, and it's a pretty bleak picture, to be honest.
Yeah.
Is there a way out of this, winter of civilization that Han describes? Where do we go from here?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Han does offer some glimpses of hope, some alternative ways of being in the world, and to understand those, we need to delve into his fascination with Eastern philosophy. But let's save that for the next part of our deep dive. So, welcome back to our deep dive into Byung-Chul Han's work.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff, but it's so interesting. I mean, he's really making us think, right?
Oh, absolutely. Han is he's not afraid to tackle the big questions, And what's so cool is that he's able to connect these, really complex philosophical ideas to our everyday experience.
Yeah, he's not just talking about, abstract theories. He's talking about how these systems, these ways of thinking actually affect how we live, how we work, how we relate to each other.
Exactly. And it's not just about technology either. I mean, obviously, digital technology plays a huge role in his analysis, but he's also looking at these broader cultural and historical trends. Like, he's tracing these patterns all the way back to the Enlightenment.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so it's not just a critique of, like, social media or something. It's a critique of a whole way of thinking that's been developing for centuries.
Right. And it's important to understand that context,
Yeah.
because it helps us see that, like, what Han is talking about isn't just a passing fad. It's something much deeper, much more fundamental.
It's like he's this voice in the wilderness yelling, hey, wake up, look what's happening.
Yeah. And he's not just yelling, he's actually offering some pretty insightful analysis.
Totally. And, one of the things that makes his analysis so unique is how he brings together Eastern and Western thought. He's obviously steeped in German philosophy, but he also draws heavily on his Korean heritage and his understanding of Eastern traditions.
Absolutely. And that's what makes him such an interesting thinker. He's able to see things from multiple perspectives, and that's what gives his critiques such depth.
Yeah, I'm really curious to hear more about how his ideas connect to Eastern philosophy, especially that whole emptying the self concept we touched on earlier.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But first, I want to build on something you just mentioned. Han's ability to connect these seemingly disparate ideas. Like, for example, remember how we discussed the achievement subject and how that ties into digital capitalism?
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, we're all these little achievement machines constantly striving to be more productive, more successful, more everything.
Exactly. And Han connects that to the work of the Frankfurt School.
The Frankfurt School.
Yeah. So these were like these 20th century thinkers who were really critical of the Enlightenment and its emphasis on reason and efficiency and progress.
Oh, wow. So he's going way back.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does that, tie into our lives today?
Well, Han argues that digital capitalism is basically like the logical extreme of Enlightenment thinking, It's all about maximizing efficiency, optimizing everything, turning humans into data points that can be tracked and measured.
It's like the tools that were supposed to liberate us, like technology and the pursuit of progress, have actually become new instruments of control.
That's a really insightful connection. And Han argues that this new form of control operates in these really subtle ways, through seduction rather than coercion. Like, we're constantly encouraged to consume, to produce, to optimize ourselves. We buy into this idea that we can be anything, do anything, achieve anything.
Right.
But in the process, we end up exploiting ourselves.
It's almost like that you can do anything mentality can become a kind of tyranny, pushing us towards burnout and exhaustion. And it all feels so voluntary, right? Like it's our own choice. But maybe it's not as simple as that.
Right. And that's where Han's concept of the palliative society comes in. He argues that we live in this culture that's obsessed with, like, numbing pain and discomfort and negativity. And we're constantly seeking distractions, quick fixes, anything to avoid facing the deeper issues.
So we're allergic to anything that might challenge us, that might make us feel uncomfortable. But maybe those uncomfortable feelings are actually important, maybe they're trying to tell us something.
Exactly. Han believes that this constant avoidance of negativity actually makes us more fragile, more susceptible to manipulation. And it further erodes our capacity for Erfahrung, for those deep, transformative experiences that come from engaging with the world in all its complexity.
Okay, so I'm seeing this interconnected web of ideas here. We've got digital capitalism, the achievement subject, the palliative society, this constant push towards Erlebnis and away from Erfahrung. It's a lot to process.
It is. But where does Eastern philosophy fit into all of this? You mentioned that Han finds some hope there.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that.
Okay, well, you see, while Western thought tends to emphasize the individual, the self, the ego, Eastern traditions often focus on the idea of letting go of the self, of dissolving the boundaries between self and other.
So it's less about me, and more about recognizing our interconnectedness with everything around us.
Precisely. And one of the key concepts Han draws on from Eastern thought is this idea of emptying the self.
Okay, emptying the self. That sounds pretty radical. Can you break that down a bit?
Okay, so imagine a cup. If it's full, you can't pour anything else into it.
Right.
But if it's empty, it has the potential to receive. That's kind of what Han is talking about. He argues that by emptying ourselves of our preconceived notions, our desires, our attachments to the ego, we open ourselves up to new possibilities, new ways of experiencing the world.
So it's not about becoming a blank slate, but about creating space for something new to emerge.
Exactly. And for Han, this emptiness isn't a void. It's a source of creativity, of connection, of a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
I'm starting to see how this connects to his critique of Erlebnis. Like if Erlebnis is about constantly filling ourselves up with fleeting superficial experiences, then maybe emptying the self is about creating space for something more meaningful, more lasting.
That's a really insightful connection. And this idea of emptiness isn't limited to Eastern thought either. Han also finds echoes of it in certain aspects of Western culture, particularly in the Romantic tradition.
The Romantics, I thought they were all about like passionate emotions and grand gestures. How does that fit in with emptying the self?
Well, the Romantics were really critical of the Enlightenment's focus on pure reason. They believed that there was more to life than logic and rationality, you know? They valued intuition, emotion, the subjective experience.
So they were pushing back against the very ideas that Han sees as leading to digital capitalism and the erosion of experience.
Exactly. And one of the key themes in Romanticism is this idea of longing, of yearning for something beyond the grasp of reason. And Han sees this longing as a form of emptiness, a recognition that we are not complete within ourselves, that we need something more.
So it's like that feeling of emptiness, that sense of longing, can actually be a sign that we're open to something bigger than ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And for Han, art has the potential to awaken that sense of longing, to disrupt the smooth, superficial logic of the digital world, and to remind us of the depth and complexity of the human experience.
So he's not against art entirely, because I thought he was pretty critical of contemporary art, especially that whole smoothness thing.
He is critical of art that reinforces those tendencies towards superficiality and spectacle. But he sees a lot of value in art that challenges us, that makes us think, that makes us feel.
So it's not about the medium, it's about the intention, the effect the art has on us.
Precisely. He mentions Mark Rothko, the abstract expressionist painter, as an example of an artist whose work can evoke this really profound emotional response. Rothko's paintings aren't about representing anything concrete. They're about color, form, texture, and the way those elements interact to create this powerful, immersive experience.
It's like those paintings create a space for contemplation, for kind of inward journey.
Exactly. And for Han, that kind of art can be a doorway to Erfahrung, a way of breaking through the digital noise and reconnecting with a deeper level of experience.
Okay, so we're starting to see like a path forward here. It's not about rejecting technology or culture entirely. It's about being mindful of the forces that shape us, about cultivating our inner resources, about seeking out experiences that nourish our souls.
That's a great summary of Han's message. It's about recognizing the power of these systems, but also recognizing our own agency within those systems.
And it seems like art, especially art that embraces those qualities of Erfahrung, like depth, complexity, emotional resonance, can play a really vital role in this process of reclaiming our humanity.
Absolutely. And it's not just about visual art either. It's about literature, music, dance, theater. All of these art forms have the potential to create those moments of rupture, of disruption that can shake us out of our digital complacency.
So in a way, Han is calling for a kind of artistic resistance movement.
I think that's a really powerful way to frame it. He's urging us to seek out art that resists easy consumption, art that demands our attention, art that makes us feel something real.
Like we need to cultivate a taste for the difficult, the challenging, the uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because maybe those are the experiences that ultimately lead to growth, to transformation, to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly. And maybe that's where we can find the glimmer of hope in this winter of civilization that Han describes. It's not about going back to some idealized past, but about finding new ways to cultivate meaning, connection, and authenticity in the digital age.
That's a great way to put it. But before we get too optimistic, I think it's important to acknowledge that Han is still a pretty harsh critic of our modern world, He doesn't offer any easy solutions.
That's true. And it raises an important question. Is Han being overly pessimistic? Is his focus on the negative aspects of digital technology blinding him to some of its potential benefits?
That's a good point. Maybe we need to, play devil's advocate for a moment and consider the flip side. Could it be that digital technology, for all its flaws, also offers new possibilities for connection and creativity, and even what Han calls Erfahrung?
That's a fascinating question, and one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Welcome back.
So we've spent the last two parts of our deep dive really digging into Byung-Chul Han's ideas. And, he paints a pretty, bleak picture of our digital world.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't sugarcoat it, does he?
Not at all. But I'm wondering if maybe he's being a little too pessimistic. you know? Like maybe he's overlooking some of the potential benefits of digital technology.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're saying, like, even though he makes some really valid points about the dangers of digital capitalism and this constant pursuit of Erlebnis,
Right.
maybe there's another side to this story.
Exactly. Because I think about all the ways that digital technology has actually, like, enhanced my life.
Yeah.
You know, like I can connect with friends and family all over the world. I have access to this incredible wealth of information.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like, think about how much easier it is to learn new things, to explore different cultures, to, connect with people who share your interests.
Right. And all of that is thanks to digital technology.
It's true. And what about creativity? Han is pretty critical of the smoothness of digital art, but there's so much amazing digital art out there that's experimental, challenging, and deeply engaging.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, think about virtual reality experiences, interactive installations, generative art.
Exactly. These forms of art are anything but smooth or superficial. They can be incredibly thought-provoking and emotionally resonant.
Right. And it's like we have this incredible toolkit at our fingertips, and it's up to us to decide how we're going to use it. Are we going to create things that are meaningful and thought-provoking, or are we just going to get lost in the endless scroll of Erlebnis?
That's such a good point. It's not the technology itself that's the problem. It's how we choose to use it.
Totally. And it makes me wonder if maybe Han is being a little too quick to dismiss the potential of digital technology to actually facilitate Erfahrung, those deep transformative experiences that he values so much.
That's a really interesting question because on the one hand, he's right that digital platforms can encourage superficiality and distraction. But on the other hand, they can also connect us with people and ideas from all over the world. They can expose us to different perspectives, challenge our assumptions, and maybe even help us develop empathy and understanding.
Exactly. Like even social media, for all its flaws, can create spaces for genuine connection and support. I've seen some really incredible online communities where people share their struggles, offer encouragement, and find real human connection.
Right. And think about online education. People can take courses from top universities all over the world, learn new skills, and even earn degrees, all from the comfort of their own home.
Yeah, the accessibility is incredible. And I think that has the potential to be really transformative for a lot of people.
It does. So maybe Han, while rightfully highlighting the dangers of digital capitalism, is overlooking some of the nuances and possibilities. It's all about how we use these tools, right?
Yeah, it's like, a hammer. You can use it to build a house, or you can use it to break something down. Digital technology can be used to enhance our lives or to diminish them. It all comes down to our choices and our intentions.
And I think that brings us back to one of Han's key points, It's not enough to just blame technology or the system.
Right.
We need to cultivate a certain inner disposition, a way of being in the world that allows us to navigate these complexities without losing ourselves.
Like, we need to be more mindful, more intentional about the experiences we choose, both online and offline.
Absolutely. We need to develop our capacity for critical thinking, for discernment, for recognizing what truly nourishes our souls versus what just numbs us out.
Maybe instead of rejecting digital technology altogether, we can find ways to use it to our advantage, to create spaces for Erfahrung to flourish.
I love that. It's all about finding a balance, right? Being aware of the risks, but also open to the possibilities.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Byung-Chul Han's work, I want to leave our listener with this thought. Han's critique is a powerful reminder of the potential pitfalls of our digital world.
It is.
But it's not an argument for shutting ourselves off from technology entirely.
Right.
It's a call to be more conscious, more deliberate in how we navigate this, complex and constantly evolving landscape.
It's an invitation to reclaim our agency, to cultivate those inner resources that allow us to resist the pull of the superficial, the smooth, the instantly gratifying.
And to seek out experiences, both online and offline, that challenge us, that deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world, and that remind us of what it truly means to be human.
Beautifully said.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this fascinating journey through the thought-provoking world of Byung-Chul Han. I think we've all gained some valuable insights today.
It's been a pleasure diving deep with you.
And to you, our listener, we encourage you to continue exploring Han's work and to see how his ideas resonate with your own experiences. Until next time, keep questioning, keep seeking, and keep diving deep.